Okay, so again, welcome everyone. Nyung is already sharing her screen. So as you know, today we're going to talk about topics of your interest, like the cost structure and the BIM model, and a few more technical subjects that I actually personally have no idea about. So I'm going to be learning a lot today as well. And we have Nyung that you already interacted with a couple of times, I guess, on the challenge. And we also have Anthony, also from Horizon Legacy. And I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves later on. And I'm handing it over to Nyung, who's going to start the introduction.
Hey, thanks, Lisa. So hi, everyone. Good morning from Toronto, Canada. So it's about 8 o'clock in the morning right now, but for many of you, it's probably late afternoon or evening. So it's a global competition and we've got a lot of people from all over the world. So we find that really exciting. Before we start on the talk, I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page about the information that you have. So the first thing is, a couple of weeks ago, you should have received the site description. That's the plans for your site, talking about the land itself and what's nearby. And you should have also received a site plan in Auto Revit, as well as other different formats. If you didn't receive those things, please contact us, either Lisa or myself, through the platform, and need to make sure that you have that information. You should have also received an invitation for March check-ins. So we've scheduled, each team will have 1 hour to discuss one-on-one with us, your individual questions and project. So if you haven't scheduled that meeting, please do so, because we expect after today that a lot of people will want to book. So make sure you book the time that you're available and that we're available. In addition to that, this week we will be releasing, probably through YouTube, 5 videos in a series of about 15 to 20 videos. And the subject matters that they cover it's going to be short. So it's basically a building 101 in a nutshell. And it's not intended to educate you about everything that's required to build a building, but it's just going to highlight some key topics and concepts that you should be aware of when you're going through and designing your building. So the topics that we're covering this week is, the first one is the building information model, why we're using it. The second one is site preparation, evaluation, and foundation. And even though you're not responsible for that in this competition, we're going to just explain to you the basics of what we're doing, so that you know what precedes you. The third part is going to be what goes into a building. So the key parts that you should consider in your building. And then mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. And another important consideration, designing buildings for cold Canadian climate. And some people may be already familiar with that because they live in countries that are as cold as Canada. So for example, this past week in Canada, we just had a major snowstorm, and that's a normal thing for us where we live. So we just want to make sure that for those who are unfamiliar with that, you consider some of these aspects. So today in attendance, on behalf of the Marco Polo team, is Anthony Zwig and Andrew Fontini. And they're going to be speaking to you about a couple of important things that you need to know in the competition. Andrew is our lead architect. So he's the person that will be providing your guidance on the Ontario Building Code and any local building code requirements. And Anthony will be speaking to you about costs and schedules. He's the CEO of Horizon Legacy. And so he's an important decision maker in this challenge and an important person. So listen carefully to what he has to say. You know me, of course, and my colleague, Frank Bellerique, who's very experienced on all matters of construction. And so if you have any questions about construction management, or how to execute your construction project or plan it, he's the person to talk to about that. And then in addition to that, we have two extremely capable ladies, Lisa and Emily, who have been coordinating and helping us do the administration and coordination, answer all your questions. So I mentioned, so this is today's agenda. So we're going to cover cost and schedule and how to plan for and think about some of these things. We're also going to give you a high-level overview of the Ontario Building Code. And then at the later half of the workshop, we'd like to just open it up to you. This is sort of an informal session. So bring whatever questions or things that we need to discuss. We kind of view this as a collaborative session. So we want to work with you to make sure that everything fits well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Tony.
Good morning, or good morning for us, and good day to everybody. And again, I want to echo what Lisa and Young have said. I want to congratulate everyone for your submissions. We're quite excited about them and seeing some of the ideas that are being proposed. And so we're looking forward to actually building some of them. So just wanted to review what our objectives were, and we laid out this objective to see if we could have a building built for $100 per square foot of construction cost. And this is just the construction cost, and we will talk about other costs that you don't have to concern yourself with that actually add to the cost of the building. But the goal in this competition is to produce these buildings for $100 a square foot and to cut the construction time in half. And as you know, this stage is towards building a 2-story, 3-unit apartment building. And then the last stage is to use that same technology to build a larger 12-story building. Obviously, any design has to be Ontario Building Code compliant. That's the law to be able to construct here in Ontario. And we just want to remind you, while we're all interested in getting the lowest cost possible, these buildings will be lived in, so they need to be desirable places that appeal to Ontario residents who will consider it as their home. Okay, yeah. So in our world, we divide costs into hard costs and soft costs. Hard costs are the materials, the labor, the equipment that goes into what's physically created and remains on the site. Now, it includes things that don't stay on the site. For example, think about a crane you might rent that's only there for the construction, or a 3D printer, or any piece of equipment that comes to contribute to the physical work that goes on there. Also, work that may take place, or activity that may take place off site, such as prefabrication work inside of a factory setting outside of the site. That activity and the cost of it would be considered part of hard construction costs. Also, transportation of either materials or manufactured panels or units. Again, in a prefabrication scenario, those transportation costs are also part of hard costs. What are known as soft costs are pretty much everything else. It's the work, sometimes we say it's the work that's done inside: architects, engineers, consultants, environmental work, any marketing expenses, financing, permits, regulations, legal and accounting. But for purposes of Marco Polo, we're just addressing and focusing, and want you to focus your energies on the hard costs. And I saw a question across the screen when Jung was talking. Um, the activity we want you to work on is from the ground up. We will be performing the subsoils activity, which involves investigations to determine what's necessary to be done to support a building structurally, what's necessary to make sure there aren't contaminants. That work we will do. And even though that's normally considered a hard cost, for purposes of this competition, you do not need to look at that, and you do not need to include that in your $100 a foot. We will provide a foundation or either a platform or columns upon which you will then place your building. Okay, yeah.
I'm just going to pull up the document here.
Yeah.
That explains that. Okay, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, and just one other point about the hard costs. Another hard cost is one of bringing services, utilities like gas, electricity, water to the site. Again, that's properly a hard cost, but for purposes of this challenge, we will be looking after that, and you do not need to include that in your costs. You need to include the connection, which we'll bring to the perimeter of the building, and then the internal distributions of electricity and water. So here, this is the start of the costing template that we're going to send you later today or tomorrow. And, aside, and for those of you who are experienced in construction, I think these things will be fairly self-evident. We want to make sure that there, for those of you who aren't, that you see what we're looking for. This sheet will help you arrive at your costs. And what it's doing here is it's laying out the areas in quantities and at the start, the basic floor areas that you're proposing and how to measure them. And in this area from, say, line 9 to 16, we're talking about the total floor area. So if you had a tape measure and you could hold it on the outside wall of the outside walls and run through the thickness of the walls through to the other opposite walls, those are the measurements we want you to calculate. And that's to help you understand what your construction areas are, because you will then be multiplying that by unit costs for the various materials or various work. And that's a key component to arriving at your costs. It also helps us to understand what it is you're proposing. Now, if we go down to lines 20 to 31, we're talking about the areas inside the living in the apartments. So you would hold your tape measure figuratively or however you do it at the inside walls of the apartment units. You would go through partitions to the opposite wall, inside wall. And this is important to understand how much interior livable space you're producing for the given amount of gross floor area, which is calculated above. And Young, if we just scroll down, you can see there, just line 35, a note, the best backup, we're seeking backup because we want to be able to rely on the cost proposed. So the best backup is an actual quote, or if there's third-party estimates, any kind of supporting information is helpful. And now what we've done now, going from line 38 down, you'll see we've given examples. We don't expect you to need to fill in all these things. For example, in line 43, it says equipment and machines rented. And then line 44, equipment and machines purchased. You may not be renting, you may be purchasing, or vice versa. This is just as a thought provoker to try and ensure that you pick up everything, all the items that are going to go into your building. And as we go down to A2 at line 50, you can see we're saying maybe the structural component is wood, or maybe it's metal, or maybe concrete. So it's only what's needed to describe what you're proposing. Then in A3, we're talking about enclosures, walls, exterior walls, exterior doors, windows. Just to go to what Young was talking about, our cold climate. An important part of construction here is the sealing between various items, between the doors and the windows and the walls. And here in Canada, there's continual discussion about pros and cons of different methods of sealing, because that's where a lot of problems show themselves. Interiors, you can see it's interior partitions, doors. Door hardware are hinges and locks. The apartment doors out to the public, whether whether it's to outside or to a public hall, should have a lock on it. And finishes and are up to you. Again, it's typically a trade-off between costs and something that's appealing to market to residents. We live as an owner and operator of buildings. We live and think about from a perspective of clients or potential clients have a lot of choices. And so we want our buildings to be attractive. So prospective tenants will want to come look at what we're proposing. And we'll be proposing what we select to build from your submission. Okay, Young, we can keep going down. And we have mechanical and electrical. Some of this will come up again in the video. Right now, there's codes and laws requiring residences to be heated. Right now, it is not the law to have air conditioning, but we've noticed more and more discussions in the press and amongst the regulators, given the extreme heat that we've experienced in the summers here. There's been questions about whether air conditioning should become a requirement. Exhaust systems typically relate to bathrooms and kitchens, kitchen areas. And the electrical, again, I think it speaks for itself. You have to provide light. The utilities are monitored in the suites, your energy usage. So that's really an electrical component. And so these are items. There are also life safety requirements. Certainly in the large building, there's a lot more intensity to make sure in the case of a fire. And for the most part, life safety refers to issues of fire and smoke suppression, evacuation of a building should there be an incident. Then again, general requirements and overheads refers to what we call our duties performed by a general contractor. And we will engage and pay for somebody for you, and their basic services you do not have to include in your $100 a foot, but in a normal course, they are part of hard costs. And they perform the functions to make sure the construction conforms to the laws. You know, they will put up the hoarding or the fencing. They will have the first aid kits. They will make sure the site principally is safe and provide those items so a construction site can function. Okay, no. And for the large building, we're looking at the small building. It's the same, other than there's more floors, and principally the large building, we'd expect to have elevators in the 2-story building. Also, in the large buildings, we use garbage chutes here. And so that allows tenants, without having to leave their floor, to take their garbage somewhere in the hallway and deposit it in a chute where it falls down to a receptacle down on the ground floor, and the building management will take it out. Until about 10 years ago, buildings had one chute and everything went into the one chute. Now, the rules are pushing that there be 3 chutes, one for recycling, one for the biological or wet garbage, and one for dry garbage. We had the pleasure or displeasure of having, about 10, 12 years ago, the first building to have to actually install one of these triple chutes in the building. Okay, Young, I think we can move on. And so time is obviously another key element that we're looking to you people to address. Time, you know, the shorter the time, frankly, the less the cost. Typically, buildings are financed, and interest during construction is an important and significant cost. Here, in the first 5 lines, we've laid out a typical construction time using a traditional process of 13 months. Now, again, this is after the soils work has been done, after the foundation has been done, and with the pad or the foundation finished, and then ready to put the building on top. Actual construction, where you'd have to include digging down and doing this other work, probably adds another 6 months. But again, here's a target we just wanted to share with you for just the part of the work you're involved in, where we're suggesting the structure and the topping off, actually finishing the roof from the start, might take 5 months. Closing in the exterior windows, walls, and doors would take 4 months, starting about halfway into the 5 months. Mechanical and electrical work projected takes about 3 months. Again, starting when the enclosing activity is about halfway done. Interior partitions take another 3 months, again, overlapping with the mechanical and electrical work, and then finishes fixtures and equipment. Um, here we're showing it not starting till everything else is done. In truth, there is an overlap typically as soon as we could clear out 2 or 3 floors, you would try to get the finishing people in to start doing their work. But here we just said, assume that it started after everybody's done and that they would take another 3 months. And so we're hoping to see with your innovative processes a significant improvement on these time frames. Okay. Yeah. And there's various ways and tools to help you track your time. We use a term called a PERT chart. There's different names for it, and it basically lays out in sequence how one activity follows the other. So you lay out the time of each activity, and then when one is done, you can start the subsequent activity. Or you can see here in this sample between mobilization and demo, the first 2 green bars, the one activity overlaps another. So when you add up all your discrete individual activities, which may be different trades, then you get your total time frame to complete the project. The key here, and again, where we see all the anxiety and problems come from, is in dealing with dependencies, where one activity has to be done before the subsequent one can start. And in real life, it's more complex because typically maybe 2 or 3 activities have to be finished together before a certain new one has to start. And I encourage you to just think realistically about the dependencies, because there's a cascading effect in either a positive or negative way if the planning gets those dependencies right, because you can see the coordination issues if you've arranged a delivery and the good news is the delivery shows up on time with supplies, but the bad news is the area that needed to be finished being built isn't done, and now there's a number of problems. One is where to store those materials and what's happening to the subsequent trades. So this is an area, the dependencies and the coordination is from our experience, is where the problems arise. So I encourage you to look at it in detail. And one part of that to help be accurate on it is to build in contingencies just for late deliveries. I'll give you one extreme example. We had one situation where we ordered granite that we liked very much, and it came from a quarry in the north of Sweden that was serviced by only one rail line that was generally closed in the winter. And so we had to think hard about whether we still wanted to order that granite, and then what contingencies and timeframes to use to integrate it into a building schedule. And so there's software that can help organize the thinking and display dependencies and conflicts. Okay. Is Andrew here?
I think
Yes, Andrew's here. Yeah. I'm
okay.
here. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Frontini. Sorry, I joined late. I had to bring my daughter to school. So you want me to walk you through
Yeah.
this slide? Sure, certainly. So the main reference code for this project will be the Ontario Building Code, which you can download online for free. And what it basically does is promotes the health, safety, fire protection, and resource conservation for buildings. And the sections that are really going to be really applicable to you are really section 3, which deals with critical dimensions for accessibility, for all of the kind of technical requirements for vertical transportation, for fire safety. So those are the things that you want to get into in detail. I would familiarize yourself with it, and it is based on a uniform international standard. So for many of you, these things will not be unfamiliar. Um, these standards apply to health and safety, fire protection, structural sufficiency, construction materials, plumbing, and mechanical systems. And I don't know, Tony, I'm sorry, I missed the beginning. I don't know if you've walked people through what the 30% deliverable
No,
looks.
actually, I didn't.
Okay,
No.
okay, but we'll get to that in a bit. But you will be looking at the basic configuration of your building being established so that it's code compliant. And also Division 9 of the code covers small buildings and residences. So you'll want to look at what are the requirements for a window in a bedroom, things like that. Now these are all many of them will be common sense to you. We live in a society where most contemporary buildings are designed to a uniform code. But my advice, or our advice to you, is to download this and kind of peruse it, understand what the sections are, and in our subsequent workshops, as you begin to develop your design, come forward with any specific questions you're going to have. Obviously, we're not going to orient you to the whole code on this call, but if you get into your design and you're having trouble with an issue, is it a fire separation, or is it how the accessibility standards apply to the dimensions of your units for a washroom, for example? You can bring those questions forward, and we can help guide you to the specific section of the code that will answer your question. And there is also an appendix to the Ontario Building Code, which is an illustrated guide, which is extremely helpful, particularly for understanding issues around barrier-free access. Any questions there?
Andrew, maybe could you just explain, the term barrier-free access?
Oh yeah, what barrier-free access relates to is the ability for people of any physical ability to be able to navigate a building in kind of equal terms with someone who's able-bodied. And so this applies to principally physical disabilities and covers clearances and dimensions around wheelchairs, scooters, walkers, assistive devices. And it also considers the ability of someone who is older, walks slowly, or walks with difficulty to access and use a building. So the things that really that are covered in the code have to do with the width of doors, the way the door swing works in a space and the clearances around it. So can someone open the door if they're in a wheelchair? Is there enough room for their wheelchair to back off? Open the door. Is there enough room on the left-hand side or right-hand side of the pull or push for them to get clearance? There are specific dimensions there. If they're in a space and they need to turn around, there's a 1700 clearance for a wheelchair and a 2400 millimeter clearance for a scooter, and those are requirements in different kinds of spaces. Within an individual unit, you don't necessarily need those clearances in every space, but you'll want to provide them in the main living space. And again, there are spatial requirements. A barrier-free washroom is larger than a non-barrier-free washroom. But I think what you want to think about, and I don't know if you've talked about this, Tony, is you want to make your units to a degree marketable. And I would familiarize yourselves with what an apartment building looks like in Ontario, just generically, so that you understand what would be acceptable. The code does give you a good understanding of that, because those are the minimums, and an introduction of a barrier-free washroom will mean a washroom that is more gracious, and I would advise that your washrooms are barrier-free. In each unit, you have one barrier-free washroom.
Yeah, Andrew, I was just going to ask you about that, and you'd be more up to date than me. My understanding was that not every unit needed to be barrier-free. Are you saying
that is correct by code. There's a
right?
mix, and that is described in the code as well.
Okay.
Yes, you're not obliged to, but I think there. I forget what that mix is. I'll give you an example. We did a student residence last year, and out of 34 units, 2 units were barrier-free.
Mhm.
But to an AODA standard, which meant we were accommodating scooters, so they were much larger. So that percentage mix, we can help you. We can look that up and send that out. But I would start with there's
Yeah.
a question here too. Someone, how are we dealing with questions in the chat? Are we dealing with them as they come up?
Yeah, we're just going to take them at the end. So I think we're
Oh, at the
almost
end. Okay.
finished anyway.
Okay.
Okay.
I think on the barrier-free, we may need to give some more clarification. But Andrew, I think
Yeah.
we should have our own discussion.
Yeah. Of what standard
Yeah,
do you want to set?
just to help everyone out. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's the end of the presentation. So we wanted to leave the rest for just talking, whatever questions you have, or if you want to discuss certain aspects with us. One thing that we didn't talk about in this competition in detail is the working with the local construction manager. So that person would be either Frank, who is on today's call, or Eric. And these two individuals can help work with you to plan the construction of your building and your design. So we'll do that in a subsequent workshop and talk about how to do that. And in a subsequent workshop, we'll be addressing other issues. For example, we're going to be going into detail about how to calculate the building envelope. So today we gave you a costing template that you fill in, and that will be made available on the FAQ section of the challenge platform. And in future, we're going to be going into detail about how to calculate your building envelope, working with engineers, architects, and construction managers, as well as the regulators, because we'll be interacting with them once you proceed to the finals. We're going to be discussing approval process for new materials. If any of you are considering using new materials in your buildings, we'll be going over what the process looks like in Canada. And then we'll also be touching on the subject of designing for the end user. So we want these buildings to be livable. And so what are the key considerations for that? So I will go and read some of the questions here, starting from the top. First question from Ed: is the cost of foundation calculated in the cost per square meter?
Not for your purposes. As I was trying to say earlier, for us, it will be part of our cost, but that is outside your pursuing the $100 a foot.
Okay, and there was a similar question from Vladimir. At previous call, it was said that the foundation prep is not part of the total project cost. So yes, that is the case. We're saying we will provide and offer the foundation or create the foundation for you. So you just have to build the building on top of it. So you don't have to calculate that cost as part of your project cost. Okay, so next question is from Ed. again, does the Ontario Code require fire suppression in all concrete multi-unit construction? Secondly, is a wet sprinkler system required? So I think I'm going to direct this to Andrew. So Andrew, does
Yeah.
the Ontario?
Yeah, the answer to the first question is yes, and I would recommend a wet sprinkler system. That would be your most cost effective and easiest to maintain.
Okay.
So, sorry, Andrew, you're saying in all the units?
It's a sprinkler building.
And again, you're much closer
Yeah.
to me, but I know, in the big building, obviously the garbage room and areas like that.
Yeah.
I thought, is it not optional to sprinkler a building? And certainly,
Well,
the
it
small
depends on
building?
the classifications, but this is a tall building. It's 6 stories. So, well, it's over 6 stories. So it's effectively a high rise, and it has to be sprinkled completely because of its height. Because of its height, that's the principal driver.
But not the 2-story building.
No, correct. No, it does not need to be. No.
Yeah, and so you're saying that the 12-story building,
The units would be sprinkled.
Okay.
Okay, next question from Chris. Transportation cost-wise, how can we know the nearest available facilities, say prefab factories, etc., to the site location? Okay, so I think I could answer this one. So in your site description, we explained that we wanted to keep the site private for now, just to protect the confidentiality of the landowner. They wanted us to do that at this stage. But what we would recommend is in the one-on-one meetings happening in March, please tell us what your needs are. So if you said, okay, I have this amount of equipment, I need to bring it to site, here's the weight, dimensions of the equipment, we can work with you to give you information about the site so that you can plan it accordingly. So what you do know about the site is, one, that it has highway access and street access. And you can see from the photos, the width kind of roughly that it'll accommodate, standard trucks or vehicles, or probably even cranes. The second thing is that it has access to the water. So we can deliver things by water, and it's very close, in close proximity to the water. I think it's less than 5 kilometers away from the water. It's a walking distance, it's a short distance. So that means that you can deliver anything from Europe or Asia through the water system to this site. And then in terms of prefabrication factories, so that's, I think, a unique characteristic of your project. So please talk to us in the one-on-one meetings, and we will work with you on that. Next question from Dimitri. As I understood, there is no gas pipeline or central heating line by the site. What kind of heating should we plan for the big building? So I'm going to direct this to Frank.
Hi. There's a push in Ontario to go all electric, for heating. Most, for environmental reasons, everybody's converting to clean fuels, and electricity falls into that category. So we envision that it'll be an all electric building. We also would require that the units all be individual metered, sub-metered, so that energy use can be charged to the appropriate apartment. I hope that answers your question.
Mm-hmm. Next question, again, about sprinklered or unsprinklered. Horizon has any specific requirements? So that question was answered earlier, and the answer was sprinkled system in every unit.
In the big building.
In the big building.
Yes. Yeah.
Next question from Vladimir. I previously looked over the Ontario Building Code and couldn't find full clarification for legal light and air windows. Specifically, does Ontario have a minimum clearance in front of light and air windows? Here in New York City, it's defined as 30 feet to 0 inches. 30 feet, 0 inches. I think you meant 30 inches. Thank you. So the question is there a requirement, a specific
Saying
requirement?
3 feet.
30.
He's saying clear, so I'm not sure I understand the question.
Is that
Um,
setback?
that-
Is the question made?
Yeah, I was wondering if
setback
that was
requirement?
limiting distance, if that
Yeah.
was a limiting
From a neighboring building.
Vladimir, I
property
don't know
line.
if you're on the line, but do you want to clarify your question?
Hello. So the 30-foot distance is from anything, including neighboring buildings or any kind of obstructions in NYC. That's why I'm just asking if Ontario
Yeah.
has any kind of requirements like that.
There is a that's called limiting distance, and it's actually a calculation you do, and it relates the area of your facade to through the distance to the property line, and you know, when there is not a built condition on the property line, or it's not possible, say beside the property line there was a cliff into the ocean, then you would not have that requirement. But here it would be based, here you do have the potential for a neighboring property. So I would calculate the limiting distance. I would calculate it from the lot line, and base it assuming that there's a potential for another building to have a 0 lot line condition.
Well, the main reason that I'm bringing this up is we already laid out our units and we realized
Yeah.
that we're going to have an interior courtyard to the building. So the
so you're talking
courtyard
about
has to have certain
yes.
dimensions, you know?
Correct. Okay. All right. So, well, that's then you would apply that's different. That's the limiting distances between your building and another building, which are separate fire compartments. I'd have to look into that question for you. I know what you're talking about, particularly where you have a right angle condition, right? You know, at the corner of the courtyard. What is the separation?
Well,
I know that there.
Maybe
Diagonally.
it's just New York City code is kind of extensive and they cover
Yeah.
a lot of issues that the international doesn't even go into. And
Yeah.
this distance pertains just if you're looking out of a window directly out,
Yes.
that you don't have any obstructions in front of this window within the 30 feet of length.
Right.
Because what they're arguing is if there's like a building within 20 feet, this window is no longer good enough to bring light and air into the unit. It's not a healthy unit.
Right.
It's not fire related. There's a different
It's
section
about
for fire related.
yeah. Okay, it's really about the occupants'
It's
health. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so you know that, I mean, I know that those things are often covered in the zoning or building guidelines for municipality. Like Toronto has its tall building and mid-rise building guidelines, which cover conditions like that. So maybe what we should do is we'll look through the code again, but maybe we should advise of a standard and base it on the New York City guideline.
Well, I can imagine that I'm trying to think. I've seen, say, well, certainly in an interior courtyard, but here I don't think we have that. It's really about fire separation. You know, the side of the window goes into a calculation. Window surfaces goes into a calculation. It's how far you have to be from an adjoining building. I think I guess we want to see what your calculation is, but we will try to help locate the neighboring buildings, you know, because you're one of potentially 5, and then we'll have to locate it from the property line. I'm not sure.
Well, this is for the big building or the small building for starters?
This is for the big building.
Yeah. I mean, Tony, I think the issue here, I mean, it's a fairly large site, and I would approach it almost, probably the governing factor is going to be the sort of attractiveness or marketability of the units. So I think I would try and create a gracious courtyard. I would say that the kind of attractiveness of the unit will probably be the governing factor. Well, because as Tony says, I doubt there's a municipal or
Yeah.
zoning or around the built form for a town of this size. I could look to
No,
the
but-
Toronto. I could look to the Toronto mid-rise building guidelines, and they're probably something. They're probably less stringent,
Yeah.
more
I would
stringent than
say-
New York.
Yeah, let's look at Toronto, and I think we're gonna have to come back. It's up to Vladimir or all the designers to, on their own, decide what they want to do with respect to the aesthetics of the unit, and what do you look out at. I guess we should look at it. What I'm thinking is it's probably, we should look, but I have a sense, well, we may end up just saying, look, the fire code or the fire regulations require X, and that'll be the requirement. The aesthetics is something for you to think about, and we'll make an assessment when we see it. But let us come back to you on that.
Yeah, we'll come back to you with a response. I think we need to look into it a bit.
Okay, so I actually love these kind of questions because it shows that you've already done a lot of thinking and work into your design. And so these are really specific questions. So keep going with these types of questions and don't hesitate to bring other questions like these to our one-on-one meetings. So there's a lot of different ways to contact us. You can contact us by email or on the platform, or in the one-on-one sessions, and we'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible to do a quick turnaround. So next question is from Kurt. Are you looking for roughly 30% barrier free? So I'm going to direct this to Andrew.
Yeah, and sorry, I misspoke earlier when I said we'd done 2 out of 34 units. We'd actually done 2 apartments totaling 6 individuals out of 34. So it's closer to 20%, I think, but or 25. I'm gonna confirm that.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about that too, and then come back to everybody with an answer.
Yeah.
But it would be less. Yeah, I think it's going to be significantly less than the 30%.
Well, again, these are, Tony, these are our market factors as well. I mean, you will get a recommendation out of the OBC.
Right.
You will, again, you're a high-rise building, so you start getting into specific requirements. But then,
for sure.
But then you're also going to say, in this community, who's renting these? And again, barrier-free units really apply to a lot of conditions with seniors, and people have assistive devices, or you have a married couple and one of them's in a wheelchair. So, washrooms that have level entrance and room for those devices to move around, they're marketable. So I would be thinking about your demographics as well.
Yeah. Okay.
If I can just add into this, one of the things about Ontario is that you talk about marketability, and most certainly, if all the units have extra wide doors and large washrooms and accessibility, then it becomes a far more marketable product overall, rather than limiting yourself to 30%. I mean, it's simply a design change to say that I want to put in a 40-inch door instead of a 32-inch door. And the same thing with the washroom, being able to turn, being able to go into a washroom with a walker is probably one of your bigger issues.
Correct.
I just wanted to put that out there.
No, I think that's a very valuable point. And I think we should provide some clarity around this, just to level the playing field.
No, for sure. And obviously the other side is, what's the impact on cost?
Sure. Well, that's what I mean, because if so, I think everyone needs to be shooting for the same target. And we have not established, if I'm not mistaken, Tony, we have not established a unit mix, right? We've set a gross floor area, but we've not said we want so many 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, bachelors, right?
Well, actually, I think we did. Young, did we not?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Boy, I can't lay my hands on it.
No,
Okay.
you specified in your initial meeting, you specified that there was going to be a mix of single unit two-person unit and family units. You didn't knock that down to specifics, but you did mention that you wanted a blend of the three. My suggestion is just simply that we say right across the board, let's just make these all accessible. That way you're not putting up any arbitrary barriers between people who can afford certain units. Particularly in Ontario, what we're finding is that the population is getting much older.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
accessibility is an issue, but on top of that is how many people can actually afford their first home. This also becomes an issue. So cost-wise, we have to keep that down to allow people to come into the unit. But then, if they plan to stay there for any length of time, even if you have an accident, let's say you fall on the ice and you break a leg, and you're walking around with crutches is a pain in the ass trying to move through a small door. So those are just some of the considerations that we were looking at.
Yeah, I think those are really good points, and even young families. You've got strollers. It's as cumbersome as a wheelchair. So the kind of, I think maybe what we should do is establish.
No, we'll establish,
Yeah.
as you say, Andrew, it's a good idea, a goal for this. I just know from our experience, I don't want to sound like too much of a curmudgeon. Barrier units, no question, are better socially, but they don't come without a cost.
Well, they add square footage, certainly, yeah.
And a key objective here is to try to drive a cost. But I think what we need to do is come out with
a goal,
let me, and we'll
yeah,
communicate that.
Yeah, and
so
what I would, Tony, we'll do that, and I think, but what I would encourage all the contestants to do is to take a modular approach to the planning, so that you could put in a barrier-free 1-bedroom unit, or a non-barrier-free 2-bedroom unit, or you could have put in two studios or bachelors in place of a 2-bedroom, to have a modular approach that allows you to, without completely scrapping your design, change that mix. Because this happens all the time in residential developments, that an initial unit mix is devised, start selling or looking at market interest, you find that there's a real, and this happened quite recently in Ontario, that the pressure for larger 2 and even 3-bedroom units started to push. And if a developer could consolidate 3 studios into a 3-bedroom or family unit, then they had a much more marketable product. So to maybe be thinking about that as you lay the floor plans out, how much adaptability is there in the layout, or have you shoehorned yourself into a unit mix that can't be changed? Because we have quite a lot of space around us on this site, so we shouldn't back ourselves into a corner in any design solution, because it's quite possible that even as someone wins the competition, then we kind of go through a process of refining this for the given market. That mix will change.
Mm-hmm. Great. So
okay,
we're passing the 1 hour
Yeah.
mark, and we still have 19 more minutes. 19 more messages. So I just want to go
Sure, keep them
as
moving.
many as possible. And then if we're not able to get through all the questions, then we're going to review it and post the answers on the website, so you have answers to these questions. So next question is, I think this is an easy one for Andrew. What is the scooter you were talking about?
Oh, it's an electric mobility device, like a wheelchair, but bigger, and it requires a 2,400 millimeter circle for it to turn around. So, sorry, my camera's not on, I apologize. So that's just an enhanced level of accessibility.
Okay. Next question is from Shazil. Determination of building footprint given non-conventional designs. So I think this is a question about how you calculate the building footprint. I'm gonna say we will be addressing this in the next workshop, calculating building footprint and your square footage. So we're gonna go into detail about gross floor area, livable floor area, etc. So please stay tuned for this question.
But just on that, Young, I'm not sure, as I was hearing the question, I thought, oh, and I could be way off. If, for example, the shape is a circle or a series of circles, I would think you can get the area of a circle. But, don't know what the design thinking is. So maybe we'll have to deal with that one-on-one.
Yeah. So those are the two options. Okay, so Lisa sent some questions that we received before today's session. Some people sent questions in advance. So first question, our structures require contractors and machine builders like RoboMac. Perhaps there are machines for making hinges that will be cheaper. We would like to get acquainted with the available machine tool park and production technology. Okay, so with this question, we recommend that please, in your one-on-one meetings, talk to us about that. Send us information in advance. What do you need? Explain your process. We recommend you do that instead of in a session like this. It's unique to you. Next question. The small building intended to be constructed by sponsor and/or constructor in accordance with the design will have 2 floors, 3 residential units, totaling approximately 132 square meters. Can we suggest a building with a height of 3 floors? Taking into account that one of the floors will be technical, should we place 3 residential units in a 132 square meter building, or should each residential unit be 132 square meters? So answer to the second one is all 3 units totaling 132 square meters. And the question for can we have 3 floors, I'll defer that to Tony. Do you have any opinions on this, or?
Well, is the total building area, boy, you know what, I'm not sure. I guess my question is, will that increase the total building area? And again, if so, then I see that as increasing the cost of the building. And so, and actually Young brought this yesterday, you know, we're talking about chasing dollars per square foot because it's a comparable unit of measure. But another measure that's important is what is the total square footage to produce these 3 units. And so you need to keep an eye on that because it's the total cost is important in producing the 3 apartments.
But I think from a code perspective, there's no reason, or a site planning perspective, there would be no real reason that you couldn't do a 3-story instead of a 2-story. I think it would be up to you to decide whether you can do it cost effectively. And as Tony was saying, you know, we're going to assume that you're going to achieve the same efficiency. You know, if it's 132 square meters, that's your gross area, and you're going to fit the 3 units, and you want your units to be comparable with someone else's units that are on 2 floors. So you want to test your efficiency, your net, which is the interior area of the rentable apartment, to the gross, which is the total area from the outside of the walls on every level. You want to test that. And then I would also be looking at the exterior envelope, the surface area of roof and walls that are required to make your 3-story proposal versus a 2-story proposal, because those are going to drive the cost. You know, as you go more vertical, your area of walls goes up as a percentage, but your roof area goes down. And it really depends on the built form and the plan, you know, but if you're cost conscious, you're going to want to look at those factors. And, you know, also obviously you may have a design idea in mind where you're offering a particular amenity, enhanced private. I don't know what the objective is to go to 3 floors. You may not want to talk about this on an open call, but if you have a good reason for going to 3 floors. I mean, Tony, you're running the competition. I would leave it with you, but I don't think there's not a code barrier or zoning barrier to you being 3 stories versus
No,
2.
that's correct. That's correct.
Okay, next question. This is either for Frank and or Andrew, your opinion on this one. So are there any special requirements for ventilation systems or planning taking into account the conditions of the COVID pandemic? So Frank, do you think there, would you like to see any ventilation, kind of unique ventilation systems?
That's a good question. In light of COVID, do we want any special applications with respect to the heating, cooling, ventilation systems? You know what? I'd like to think that through a little bit and get back to the team. I think that's a good question that we should contemplate.
Frank, I could give some context in terms of what we're finding with our, we have a lot of clients kind of asking similar questions in different building types right now. There's currently no code or legislative change, related to COVID in terms of provision of mechanical, electrical, and ventilation requirements. But what I would definitely, and this is covered in the code anyway. You are not going to be sharing any transfer of air, either return or supply air, between residential units. And I would, and obviously this is going to be covered in the code as well. A residential program needs operable windows so you can ventilate with fresh air. I would just say as a matter of good practice to focus on an environment where you have lots of access to natural ventilation, and you have independent heating and cooling, if we in fact are providing cooling for each unit. Those would be the kind of basics, but there isn't any kind of code. Now, when it comes to the planning of the building, elevators, for example, have become really challenging because elevator occupancy is really affected. People don't want to ride an elevator with someone else anymore, so that makes the efficiency of your elevator go way down. So what we have been asked, and people have been considering, investing in extra elevators or going to a digital automated system, which at least increases the call time and efficiency of the elevator, an on-demand digital call system. So those are the sort of things that we've seen at this stage. There's nothing in the books yet. So I would just use common sense, and we've all been reading about how fresh air, natural ventilation, access to outdoor space, those are all kind of important factors, and you would may want to provide those, and in some cases have to provide those in a residential building by code.
Okay.
Now, if we want to interpret this, if with the team, our team wants to kind of huddle and think about more deeply about what the implications are and whether we want to request any requirements, we'll do that. But currently, it is more or less business as usual in terms of how buildings are going up.
Okay. Next question. By default, the facade of our building is provided with a soft membrane. Is additional anti-vandal coverage required? So I guess this is for Tony or Frank, if you have an opinion on that.
I know in the past what we've done, for example, is we've had, say, the first 3 floors of a building were in brick, and then above that it was a treatment which called EFIS. There's another term for it, I can't remember. So I would think maybe for the lower floors, you might want to think about that.
Yeah, I would say, as owners and operators of buildings, I mean, graffiti is part of life, and being able to, remove the graffiti is important, So when I think of, being an owner of a building, I want to be able to maintain it to a certain, standard, a high standard, I would say. And And yeah, I would like to see some consideration given to either putting a surface that can be easily washed or cleaned or sandblasted to get rid of the graffiti, or as a minimum be able to I don't know, paint it over again, for example. I don't know. But graffiti is it's a fact of life, and we want to be able to remove it if we get tagged.
Yeah, I was thinking more of somebody taking a pen and just sort of idly standing around, not that they came to vandalize the building, but people, standing on a corner waiting, and if they're near a building, they just sort of end up, so hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, I would think if with any non-conventional building material, and if this is kind of a membrane structure, an inflatable structure, I mean, because the tall building will require it to be non-combustible, so it's really important that whatever this is made out of is non-combustible, and that's covered in the code. And we may need to look at, sometimes you have to get materials tested in Canada if they aren't already classified through the Canadian standards, CSA. And I think I would think a general durability, what happens if someone has a truck with a ladder on the back, is it puncture proof? I think there needs to be a level of durability that's achieved in the lower levels for sure. Just wear and tear and potential for tearing. I don't know what the membrane is exactly made of, but puncturing, tearing, you want something that can withstand, kind of general abuse, and then something that's not combustible. Think the Hindenburg. We don't want that.
Right. So good, robust building. Next question from Alex. Are there any typical costs for 3D printer rentals that we can use for this project? Getting pricing from 3D printer manufacturers has proven to be fairly challenging so far. So I would say this is the part that we're looking to you for in being resourceful and offering your solution and process. While we don't want to give pricing for 3D printer rentals or any kind of equipment, we will help you if you said this is the kind of equipment that I need to bring to the site for transportation purposes, for instance. But as we said in the last presentation in November, what we're doing is we want you to bring the technology and we'll support you to build the building. And do the administration and construction part. But for all the technology aspects, we view it as your responsibility. So next question is regarding construction schedule. This is regarding the BIM, construction schedule, BIM 4D, and cost schedule, BIM 5D. Are these sections supposed to be developed in some specific software like Timeliner? What are the requirements for these sections? Can they be presented in the form of regular tables, construction schedule 4D and construction schedule 5D? Are these sections supposed to okay, so sorry, let's repeat. Okay, so we've offered the site plan in Auto Revit as well as I think AutoCAD and other formats. We had a question earlier last week. Somebody was using Google SketchUp. So with your construction schedule and costing, in the ideal case, we would like it to be presented in a BIM model, and there's a lot of different free software that you can use for that. And in the videos that we're going to be releasing this week, we make some suggestions on that as well. So there are some free versions that you can use. If for whatever reason you cannot use these software, then we would accept equivalent output. But keeping in mind that construction schedule sequencing, for instance, is better illustrated in BIM, So it's to your benefit to use these tools. But if for absolutely reason you can't use it, then we would accept, for instance, cost schedule like in the Excel sheet that we gave you. In fact, we want you to output whatever it is into your Excel sheet so it's all comparable. And as well, we would accept a standard kind of Gantt chart or timeline in Microsoft Project, or there's a number of tools that you can use, but be as detailed as possible, because there's going to be 20 submissions, very detailed submissions. And so the better that you're able to communicate your idea, the better that we can understand and evaluate it. So I hope that answers the question. Contestants are required to provide the following outputs from their BIM. For the small building in PDF format of maximum 25 horizontal legal size documents, please specify the size of the legal size. Okay, so legal
Is 8.5 by 14 inches.
8.5 by 14 inches. Okay. So it's 8.5 by 14 inches. We don't want you to print it out, just print it out in PDF, but that's the size of the document that we'd like to see. Next question, is it possible to get from you the initial data for the design in any formats other than Revit, DWG, PLA, etc.? How important it is to develop a commitment to Autodesk Revit? So like we said, the site plan has been provided in other formats. If you haven't received it, please contact Lisa. She has those alternative formats. We are not committed to Autodesk Revit, although most likely if you submit a model, we will be reviewing it in Autodesk Revit. But if not, we would consider other formats as well, as long as they're equivalent. Okay, next question from Shazil.
But I think I would just also add, as long as we can read them, as long as there's, compatibility or an ability to translate them into, kind of industry standard that we'd be familiar with.
Okay. From Shazil, heating utility provisions, gas, etc., cooking fuel requirements. I think this question was answered earlier. So typically we are expecting gas to be eventually phased out in Ontario for environmental reasons, and it is currently being encouraged. So all heating, cooking, energy usage, we would recommend using electricity. So assume that you're using electric. Shazil again, HVAC exhaust, please elaborate. HVAC plant machinery placement, ideal locations, any recommendations? So Frank, can I get you to answer this question?
Yeah, I could speak to that. So in the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning costing breakdown, we've asked you to isolate the cost of exhaust systems. Typically, in a large building, there will be requirements for bathroom exhaust, a kitchen exhaust, which is sort of the range hood over the stove. You may also want to provide exhaust fans for garbage handling areas or mechanical areas that require exhaust for, because of heat generating equipment. So this is what we envisioned to capture for costing purposes. We'd like you to isolate the exhaust systems that are going into the building. As far as placement of machinery in the building, we would like to avoid a basement here. It's really up to you where you want to put the machinery. In Ontario, typically we see mechanical rooms being built on roofs. These mechanical rooms house central ventilation equipment that's used, for example, pressurization of corridors or staircases or elevator shafts as may be required by code. So the roof is usually a place to look at for housing this stuff. Some of you may say, well, geez, I want my roof to be a green space, a garden. that's great. You need to figure out where to put the mechanical equipment if it's not going to go on the roof. But again, I'd like to avoid building a basement if at all possible.
Well, I can clarify that. We're the plan is not to build a basement.
There you go.
So,
And I would just add that, the individual units should, what's conventional is just to have a heat pump and a combination potentially of radiant heating that is specific to the unit. So located within it, usually a closet of some kind on an exterior wall.
Okay.
So that would not be a central heating and cooling system.
Okay. Okay, so from Shazil, any telecommunication requirements, shared utilities possible? Is that possible? Like, for example, a laundry room. So we are assuming that you will put internet and telephone, wired copper line. And in terms of shared laundry or utilities, shared laundry is, I think we'll leave it up to you as your choice. Some higher end buildings in Ontario, Canada, they have each unit has their own laundry facilities. And in other buildings, they have a shared laundry facility. So for the marketability of your building, and the points associated with that in terms of livability, we'd get, obviously recognize more points for marketability and livability if it was shared, it was individual laundry. But if it's a cost issue, then it's better to have a shared facility. So we'll leave that to you as your design decision. Next.
Yeah, I think I could just sort of try and help and give some guidance. The cost issue I would expect would drive to a shared facility. We're talking about in the big building. And I would leave that with you. And in the small building, I think that's up to you what you would think you need.
Okay. So next two questions from Alex. First question, does the small building need BF access? Not sure what BF.
Barrier-free access.
Barrier-free access. Okay.
Yeah.
And
well,
second,
I mean, let's clarify that. I mean, it's if it doesn't have an elevator, which we don't want to give it, I'm sure, right, Tony?
Yeah.
I think that's an unnecessary cost. So it would not be barrier-free. The ground, you could provide a barrier-free unit at grade, but the upper level would not be barrier-free. So, maybe the team wants to reconvene and say, let's say one of the units at grade is barrier-free, the other two do not need to be. That'd be one approach. But Tony, it's really your call.
Yeah. So I think we need to talk internally, and then we'll communicate to everybody.
okay. Next question, two questions relate to the unit mix. So Alex said, these are the requirements for big building in the appendix. Ideal mix of residential types is approximately 30% studio, 50% one bedroom, 20% two bedroom types. And Shazil also asked unit mix per floor. So do you have a preference for unit mix per floor, or it's really the building? And I think earlier it was discussed, Andrew mentioned that, sometimes what they do here is they design certain types of buildings, one bedrooms, two bedrooms, or studios, and then build in some flexibility into your design so that if the market wants more of one type, that we can put more in. So we've suggested a mix, but do you have a preference for mix per floor, unit mix per floor?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I don't. Sorry, I don't think so. I think we were when I say that we weren't. I think we're indifferent unless somebody has another idea on the mix per floor. It's really looking at the overall building. A distribution of different type units, because you may find just layouts end up being more efficient, putting all of one type on one floor, and that's fine.
Well, I think we should, I mean, this is again a conversation for our team. I think that the fairest thing to do is to publish a mix based on a percentage
Yeah.
and that everyone conforms to. And I think, yeah, you're right. We're probably agnostic around the mix per floor, although I would say because it is a tall building, you're going to be extruding vertically, and structurally the simplest thing will be to to have the same structural arrangement on every floor, which sometimes dictates that you have the same mix on every floor.
For sure.
Typical floor plate, basically. So, but I think we should get back to you on the barrier-free ratio and the mix ratios.
Right.
Okay. Okay, next question. So we're almost at the end of the questions. Final one question from Dimitri. What should we prepare for the March check-in? So for the March check-in, we're going to be, here you can talk to us about whatever you want. So if you have particular questions about your design or clarifications that you need that are unique to your design, then please talk to us about that. Send us information in advance so that we can review. Show us, you could do whatever you want. So you could show us your building, we can give you feedback on it. You could, if you need specific help on transportation, logistics, estimates for specific things like windows or doors or whatever it is, talk to us about those unique issues. We do plan to have future check-ins, so this one will be the first one. So we'll probably check in once every 1.5 or 2 months. But it's really your opportunity to talk to us about your design and for us to help you resolve any issues or problems that you're having related to the construction and the constructability of your design. So at the beginning, Ed said at the beginning, you said you would address the definition of 30% complete. Is that still intended? So I think I'm going to leave that one to the end. I think some of these other questions we can answer more quickly. So are you sure you want to wire telephone into the building? Everyone has a cell phone now. Why a landline? Yes, so we recognize that, but just plan for one anyways. And it might be required. Yeah, and I was just going to say, and Vladimir just said, at minimum telephone lines are used for fire alarm and tie-ins. Yeah, so there's might be some infrastructure that still requires a connection to the phone line. For example, we know that utilities like we work with Hydro One, for instance, and they have certain electrical and control systems that require a dedicated phone line for the building. You might also have meters that require metering for each unit to measure your electricity, and that may require a phone line, like a hard copper line. So we're saying plan one and consider one anyways. It's not just for communications, it's for these safety systems and control systems for the building. So I don't think there's any other questions other than the question about 30% design. So I'm going to switch over to the rules, and I guess I'll ask Andrew to just talk a little bit about his expectations for the 30% design, which is in section, I think it's section 5 of the rules. And I'm just going to pull up the screen here. So Andrew, can you talk to us a little bit about what you expect? What is the difference between 30% and 100% design? I think maybe.
I'm muted, yeah, that's the problem. The difference really is in the level of detail. So at 30% design, we have all of the drawings that you would need to build this building in terms of its configuration. So we have complete elevations, plans, reflected ceiling plans, interior elevations, site plan, And we could be submitting the project for a building permit and site plan approval. Well, not quite building permit, but we're very close to being ready for building permit. And what is missing is specific construction details of the entire building. But you see here what we're looking at to get wall sections at 1 to 125, or sorry, 1 to 25. We'll have typical details at 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, which are indicative. They're not comprehensive. That's really what's missing. I would say the first 5 categories of drawings, you know, wall sections, elevations, and plans, they're all complete. And what then we have a limited number, and we're asking here for 4 details at 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, which show how the thing goes together and allow us to validate or understand that your proposal aligns with your costing. So that when we look at the details, we don't say that is either unbuildable or incredibly expensive to build. But to actually build the building, to get to 100%, you're going to have sheets and sheets of those details at 1 to 10. You'll have dozens and dozens of them. So it's really about the detailed fit out. From the perspective of your building systems and structure, you know, you will have indicative drawings, and we feel that there will be a lot of development in the structural, mechanical, and electrical detailed drawings. That'll probably be the biggest gap between 30% and 100% completion. And you see here in this list of deliverables, we are placing an emphasis on the logistics, so the scheduling, the kind of sequencing, and the costing, so that is quite developed, and you know, your drawings need to be developed enough for you to be able to stand behind the cost and the schedule of this project. Obviously, there'll be some variance. There'll be there's always contingencies beyond our control, but you know, we want to understand the scope of your building, the design, and what it's made out of completely, and be very close to being able to take this to an authority to submit for site plan and submit for building code. When you submit for building permit, it's really a code review and a zoning review, and they are not looking for every detail in the building to be resolved, but they want to understand that it can stand up. They want to understand that it meets code in terms of its insulation values, the way it's put together. So it is you know, it is for those of you who are familiar with the construction and industry and architectural and design industry, you are entering the construction documents phase. You know, you've got all of the planning and configuration completely resolved, and really it's about the details to finish in the final stretch.
Right. And Andrew, I assume that, let's say if there was 1 or 2 minor misinterpretations of the Ontario Building Code, that you and your team would pick that up and help, you know, make sure that that's on par. But we are hoping and expecting that they will review that, and throughout the next few months work through some of those details so that it's ready. It's sort of almost ready to be submitted for a building permit, right?
Yeah, correct. I mean, I think the thing that that's what we really want to use these upcoming one-on-ones and workshops for, is show us what you've got, and we'll try and catch any kind of glaring inconsistencies or non-compliances and help you correct those, and so that your 30% 30% submission is, you know, is buildable and ready to go forward to get a permit.
Okay. Okay, so I think that's the end of the list of questions that we received. Is there anyone who has any other burning questions that they'd like to put before us, or we'll give the floor to you? Okay, so it looks like we've answered all the questions for today. So thank you very much, everyone. We're very excited to see what you come up with and for the future conversations that we have with you. Oh, it looks like there's one more. Oh, do you intend to reveal the names of the teams that are still in? So that has been published already. I think, Lisa, you could send the list of the teams that are in stage 2. I think we published that 2 weeks ago. So if you, Lisa will send you a link at the end of this call.
It's on the platform anyways. There's a tab that we added called News, where you can find all the names. I can just send you the link to that tab. Also, I just wanted to, somebody just posted them also on the chat. So.
Oh, somebody just posted it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And after maybe could our team stay on, and Andrew, so we could discuss some of these issues?
Sure.
Yeah. So Lisa has already posted today's presentation on the platform. I think as well as the construction cost template that we reviewed with you earlier today. So both are on the FAQ tab of the website. And we're going to review all the questions that we received today and some of the follow-up items, barrier-free and unit mix, etc. We'll post it as on the FAQ as well, so you have answers to that. And yes, the recording will be shared with everyone so they have access to it. And so I hope that you got the message today that, you know, in addition to the people that you see today, there's more people in the background, a team of people that are willing and ready and able and really excited to work with you and support your ideas and bring your ideas to life. So thank you for participating in this this stage of the competition, and we look forward to talking with you later at the beginning of next month.
Great. Yeah. So again, I haven't, just a small correction, I haven't posted the presentation yet, but the cost template, I will post the presentation along with the recording of today's meeting. And also, I'm gonna try to my best to get enough. We have to look into that because I noted all the questions and I took some notes, but I'll just need your help, guys. Maybe you can look over that, Anthony, Frank, Andrew, and Jung, and then we can even post the questions that you asked in the FAQ section, so we have everything that has been said today in written form and easy to access as well.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Good
Thank
luck.
you a lot. Good luck. I think the next step will be the individual check-ins. Don't forget to book those and prepare. As Nung was saying, you can send any question and any information that you want to share with the team before that already. So that helps for Nung, and I think it's Nung, Anthony, and Frank, and maybe also Emily holding these meetings so they can prepare. And as Nung said before, it's really for you to talk about anything that you need and what your questions are specific to your project. And then we'll also announce the more specifics on the topics for the second workshop soon. Thank you so much. Bye.